Hey, I'm going to explain to you how, what, where, and why I feed my bees in midsummer. Stay tuned. Good morning. Welcome back to Pine Meadows Hobby Farm. I'm your host, Jerry Hansen. I am feeding the bees today, and I have been feeding them for about a week now. It is midsummer, and the reason why I like to feed them midsummer is when I've collected honey from the bees, I want to give them enough stores for the winter. Or if it's a weak hive, a small hive, or a new hive, I want to be sure to feed them enough so it what it does, it triggers them to start drawing out comb. Because what happens is, well, let me show you. When I set frames in, I choose a wax coated preformed frame foundation with frame that I put in the honey supers. And with the wax coating on this is already imprinted with the little hexagons, the size of the cells that the bees will draw out. The bees have these little plates in their underbellies that create this wax, and somehow they do the miracle of making wax, and they start drawing out the comb. Especially when there's food available, they need to get that food stored. Let me show you what a wax foundation looks like. Now, this one is a total wax foundation. I mean, totally drawn out by the bees. They built that, just an empty frame, and the bees built this foundation out. Totally wax, two-sided, and this is where the food availability must have been plentiful because they had to get the food in store on these frames to get them stored up for winter and to feed the colony to help them through the winter months. Now this frame is, again, a plastic foundation coated with wax that the bees drew out. Both sides they drew it out, and it'll do the same thing with the other ones. I like spinning these out in the centrifuge because the foundation does not bust up, and it creates less of a hassle for the bees. The bees can go in there and rebuild really easy, really quick, and we can get them to start storing more honey. Also, in the bigger boxes, which is the brood chambers, I like to put some frames like this in there, so it helps also the bees. They'll draw the wax out, they'll lay some pollen cakes or bee bread, and then they'll lay up honey in that, but they also create empty cells, which is what the queen is looking for, to lay eggs in and raise a new colony of bees, or increase the size of the colony. And that's what I'm looking for right now. Midsummer, I'm looking to increase the colonies on all my hives that I have bees in. So right now is the time. This is first week of August, second week of August, 2022. The nectar flow is kind of there, but not as much as what I like to see up in my area. So I'm feeding the bees a mixture and helping them store up and pull out the wax on these frames. Now, this time of year, it's okay on where you feed your bees. And I ended up moving my feeder away from the hives because what happens if you're feeding, my experience, when I'm feeding my bees here in their apiary, that bee food draws in feral colonies, wasps, hornets, everybody from the whole area to this central location in close proximity to my hives. What that does, I found out personally, is when that food is gone, they're now looking around the area for more food, and then they start going in these hives and getting the food out of there. And a weak colony cannot defend against a horde of bees from another colony to come in and start taking their food. That is called robbing. So that is the reason why I moved my bee feeder away from the hive. In the winter, it's a different story, but right now in the summer, you don't want to encourage other feral colonies or other form of pollinators to come in to your apiary and start robbing from your girls. Now let me show you where I placed my feeder. As you can see here, I placed the feeder up by my gate. It gives me close proximity to keep it full of food. This is a 5-gallon bucket. I fill it with 4.5 gallons of liquid, which is sugar and water. I'll mix up a blend here in a moment and we'll refill this. But I filled this yesterday. This bee feeder is now set about 100 feet from my apiary. And this keeps the other bees away from my bee yard, but it also attracts my bees to this. And I'm feeding all the pollinators, so that's a good thing. But 4.5 gallons in one day. That's a lot of bee food I'm mixing up, and a lot of bee food that they're eating. Just a simple 5-gallon bucket. I have just regular straw in there because the straw will float. And then I pour my mixture in there and it floats to the top of the mixture and it has something for the bees to land on, go down there, drink, and fly away. Very little loss of drowning bees in a syrup. So now let's go in and I'll show you my mixture and just the proportions that I'm doing it, summer proportions. In my utility room here, I've got a 5-gallon bucket in the sink and I've got a 50-pound bag of sugar, which I've been using on it. I think I have about, 10, 15 pounds left. So we're going to go ahead and fill the bucket a third of the way full and then top it off with warm water, so the warm water will help dissolve that sugar and give it into a thin syrup consistency. And I'll go ahead and stir it with a slotted spoon. Now I'll just go ahead and add some cold water. Make sure that sugar is good and emulsified. Melt it down so there's no granules. It makes it easier and better for the bees, but the bees can harvest those granules too. Okay, that's it. Let's go feed the bees. You can probably identify a couple of variety of bees and maybe some hornets in there. This is the community feeder. So by afternoon, that thing is swarming with bees, and it's still okay for me to go walk through there. They won't bother me because they're not after me. They're after that food, and they're so distracted. But anyway, that's why I feed my bees here, and that's what I feed my bees. Probably a third part of granulated sugar to 2/3 of water. Warm water, it emulsifies it a lot better. Also, I feed it away from my colonies, my beehives, because that stuff is going to attract feral bees from all over the place. Even my feral bee colony I have in a hollow tree up behind my barn. I'm going to go ahead and leave this bucket out here and let the bees clean it up. There's just a little residual of moisture in there that's sweet, so they'll go ahead and clean that up. and then haul that back. And this will help them draw out that comb that isn't drawn out and start laying up in store for themselves through the winter months, because they're going to need a lot of carbohydrates. They're also laying up in some pollen. I do have pollen patties in the hives that they're taking from and making pollen bread. And plus I have different flowers they're still producing, so they'll be able to glean naturally from that, like what I see right here around my yard. Look at this girl. She's loaded with pollen on her legs. Her little pollen sacs. Nice. And this is that bucket 2 hours later. I knew that it would draw a lot of bees just to come and clean it up. And this is the feeder bucket 2 hours later. See how many more it attracted, and look how much they have already drank and taken back to their hive. This is a good thing. There you have it. 4.5 hours. This sucker's almost empty. That was 4.5 gallons. So it's about a gallon an hour is what they're drinking. Well, that's it on this episode. I'm Jerry Hansen, your host here at Pine Meadows Hobby Farm from the apiary. Saving the bees to save the world. Stay tuned to more videos. You can do that by subscribing and clicking the bell icon. That alerts you to new videos as I upload them. Give us a thumbs up, click that share button down below, and sharing my videos on your social media platforms helps us out. Be safe, always be kind. We'll see you guys in my next adventure.